welcome to A.R.E Live. I'm Mark Tier, the founder of Black Spectacles. And today I'm with Mike Newman, who's going to talk about our construction documents and services mock exam. This is one of those tricky exams because many of you guys probably think you already know the ins and outs of putting together drawing sets. But this exam's other focus, which is contracts, in many cases, the questions that they ask about contracts are sort of word problems, and it's kind of tough to understand what they're really asking you. So we're going to run through some examples that will help you dissect the questions so you really know what they're asking tonight. But before we get started, if you'd like to attend our next A.R.E live broadcast, where we will discuss the site planning and design exam, you can visit blackspectacles.com/podcast to register. And during the broadcast, just like tonight, you'll have a chance to ask questions to the group and get feedback from Mike. Now, if you don't know Mike, he's an adjunct professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. He's also the founder of Shed Studio, and he's the instructor for Black Spectacles' online AIA A.R.E prep curriculum. If you haven't already checked out our AIA A.R.E prep curriculum, head over to blackspectacles.com, where you can watch any of the free tutorials from the courses. And today we have a couple of special things. So we have a special Black Spectacles promo code to share at the end. And then also we'll choose someone from all the folks who submitted their answers to our mock exam, and whoever the winner is will receive a free 1-month A.R.E plus software Black Spectacles membership, and we'll also be tracking all of your answers, and whoever gets all of the answers right from today's mock exam will get a free Black Spectacles t-shirt. So stay tuned for that as well. But first, let's hand it over to Mike.
All right, thanks, Mark. So, as Mark was just saying, the Construction Documents and Services exam focuses on sort of a whole lot of different issues, but the two big parts of the issues are putting together construction document sets, so the drawing sets and the specification books, the project manuals, and also the contracts. Those are the two big things, the kind of sets and the contracts. And then there's lots of other potential discussions as well. And as we just started to allude to, as Mark was just saying, one of the things, most of the time on the exams, if you're talking about, say, structures or systems or something, typically the question is fairly straightforward. You're going to get a question on, whatever the topic is, and it's going to essentially ask you, do you know what the answer to this is? When it comes to the contracts, there'll be a few questions like that, but there'll also be a bunch of questions that are sort of more obliquely written, and you have to kind of read through the scenario that they give in order to understand what they're really actually asking. And so as we go along, the questions that we have tonight are relatively straightforward, but as we go along, what we're going to do is we'll talk about kind of what each of the questions is sort of really getting at, and maybe a little bit about why that would be the case, but also kind of just kind of thinking about how you just kind of dissect those, both the questions and the answers as we go along. So hopefully that'll make sense as we move forward. So let's check it out. Let's start with the first one. Hang on a second here. There we go. Okay. So our first question, this is a fairly simple question, but actually is sometimes a little surprising to folks, and really comes down to kind of the way that you start to really imagine how to present information, complicated information, to a lot of different people. So our question is, which is the correct order for a typical construction drawing set? And then we have 4 different orders of drawings that would be in the drawing set. A, architecture, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, civil. B, architecture, civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. C, civil, architecture, structure, plumbing, mechanical, electric. And then D, the order changes by occupancy type. So the first thing to say is D is not the answer. The order does not change by occupancy type. There could be reasons why you would do a different order than the standard. And that could be all kinds of different reasons. It could be because of occupancy, but it's more likely that it would be because of the specifics of the situation, where it's just a very tightly held contract. Maybe you're only doing a design set, not a full set, something like that. So there's lots of reasons why the order might change. But in terms of the way the question is written, a typical construction drawing set. So that's one of the first things to notice, is words like typical. When you see a word like that, that's something that is telling it's different from always, or it's different from words like never or always, or this is how it will always move forward. This is saying, what is the standard? And so you should be thinking about it not from a, how can I answer this in a way that's going to show that I'm really smart. You should be thinking about this from the standpoint of, what is it actually asking me? And what it's actually asking me is, how does the standard thing happen most of the time? Most of us would probably assume, just if you hadn't spent any time thinking about it, that we would start with the architectures, so either A or B. In fact, the actual answer is C. And the reason for that is that there's sort of a kind of peculiar order to these things. And that peculiar order is that most of the big sets of information, architecture, structure, then all the plumbing and mechanical and electrical, that sort of is sort of this set thing. But before you get to those drawings, you actually start with the civil drawings, sometimes the landscape drawings, sometimes even demo drawings, and then you get into architecture, structure, plumbing, mechanical, and electric. One of the things that always throws me off on this is, for years and years and years, I've always been talking about things as the architecture and then the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and people generally will talk about it as MEP, but that's not the appropriate actual order. The appropriate actual order would be PME. Some places will do mechanical first and then plumbing. It's kind of an interesting conversation, because always the question is, who goes first in terms of the construction schedule. But the way that most of the guidebooks will tell you, the way that sort of general preponderance of these things is that it'll be plumbing, mechanical, and electric, starting with civil, then architecture, and structure always comes right after the architecture. Once you get past electric, then all the other consultants, so you might have kitchen consultants, vertical transportation consultants, any number of other possibilities. Any of those folks would happen, fire protection, for example. All of those things would come after that first set of different topics, different disciplines. The one sort of caveat to all of this is that the actual first sheet is usually considered an architecture sheet. So the cover sheet to the whole thing is an architecture sheet, but then it would move into civil and landscape and all of those before it gets to the typical architecture.
Okay. It actually looks like, let's see here, it looks like almost everybody got this right. Actually, I would say about 90% of the folks got it right. Jamie has a comment here. He's saying that another resource is showing that it's just MEP, that's the right answer to this one. What are your thoughts on that?
That MEP is correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I say, I went through school talking about it as MEP. My office always talked about it as MEP. And then as I've started looking through all the documentation, pretty much everybody talks about it as PME. You'll see differences in different parts of the country, some local variation, but really nobody does it as MEP generally if they're following the sort of kind of AIA guidelines. So if you look at the professional handbook, the Architect's Handbook for Professional Practice that the AIA puts out, it'll put it as PME. And if you look in Ballast and all of those kinds of places, it'll talk about it as PME. So like I say, it's always been confusing for me because I went through school talking about it as MEP, and I still talk about it as MEP, but in fact that's not the sort of appropriate way of doing it.
Okay, very good. Let's go on to the next one then.
And before we go on, let me just say real quick, one of the reasons for that is that you actually essentially put the E at the end there, because the E is the one, the electric is the one that is the least in the way of everybody else. So if you're trying to sort of figure this stuff out as kind of a construction sequence, now a set of drawings is not the same thing as a construction sequence, but the idea is that it's sort of in line with that. And the electrical is the easy one to kind of fit around everything else. The plumbing, which has to go by gravity, at least the waste lines do, and the mechanical, which has great big ductwork and all of that, those things have to go first, and then the electrical can kind of fit around them. So that's why the electrical is going to the end. It's not just a random thing. It's actually thinking about kind of construction sequencing and how that moves through. Once you get into some of the other topics, like elevators and vertical transportation and things, it's kind of out of the realm of construction sequencing, because obviously that would happen pretty early in the construction sequencing, but it's just that it doesn't happen every time, and so that goes to towards the end of the set.